Welcome back to the SaaS Playbook, the podcast where we get into the real conversations that don't make it onto LinkedIn. The messy middle, the hard lessons, and the thinking behind why people build what they build. If you're a founder or leader in the B2B space, this one's for you. This episode is brought to you by Hera Digital, revenue architects who build the sales engines B2B businesses actually need. If that resonates, drop a comment and type engine and somebody will reach out to you. Today's guest started her business after pitching a 4-day work week to a global CEO and getting shot down in flames. That moment became a catalyst for everything. Anne Rayner is the founder of Productivity Bargain, a step-by-step program helping progressive leaders create and protect the time in a work week by treating time as a strategic lever, not a luxury. With AI now in the mix, her work has never been more relevant or more urgent. Anne Rayner, welcome to the show.
Hello, great to be here, Jenny.
Awesome. So I guess before we dive in, going back a few steps into your early inception days, but you were leading multiple markets across Southeast Asia, trying to deliver growth without burning out the people you needed most, and the system that just kept running faster and faster. What made you decide to stop trying to fix it from the inside and just go out and build something yourself?
Yeah, so as you said, had a moment where I got shot down in flames. That was the catalyst. So let me take you back and just share a little bit about what happened, relive the moment. As you said, I was leading some of our Southeast Asian markets, and I was in the insights and market research space, so very much a services industry. And it was also a private equity environment. So there was constant pressure to do more with less, to grow revenue with the same resources, or if we couldn't grow revenue, then cut resources to preserve margins. And I realized that there were two really strategic challenges that I was facing as a leader in those markets. The first was how to deliver those outcomes without burning out the people, because we were effectively selling time. And so that pressure directly fed through to how many hours I was asking them to do. And then the second thing was, how do we attract and retain the international quality talent that we needed, that our clients expected to deliver the results that they needed and the quality of work? And so with these two questions in mind, I had to put together a 3-year strat plan. And as part of that, I decided I would make one small recommendation as part of it, that in one of the markets, let's pilot a 4-day work week, because I had read a lot of the evidence and the experiments that showed it was good for business, not just good for people. It was a strategy, not a perk. So that was the moment where I got shot down in flames. I presented that and it totally derailed the conversation about the next 3 years. I was told I was not commercial. I was told I should not have raised that. So it was quite confronting to realize that it had so derailed all of the other really great stuff that had gone into the strategy document. And we ended up talking only about this one line and how that showed I was not commercial. And so that was, I guess, the moment when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to really do things completely differently and build a better playbook from within the system. And actually what I needed to do was take a step back, redesign how work can happen to create, I guess, break that tension between time and money so that we could deliver greater outcomes without it requiring everyone to put in more and more and more time. And then make that really sort of safe and structured so that other people who wanted to do something like this wouldn't get that same fear-based reaction that I got, that there was a process to follow to raise productivity without burnout.
I think it's clever because you took a pain, you took a realization, and you weaved it into a business, right? And a lot of great businesses start like that. And it comes from real pain. And I think there's no better sudden realization than when you get shot down in flames when you're pitching it. The thing that you said that stood out to me the most was they ignored everything else on that strat. And that's what kind of concerns me, right? I'm like, what's the direction that this business is heading into if they ignored about everything else? And that was the only line item that they were concerned about. Needless to say, it didn't align with you personally either, right? So you're like, you know what, this is not for me. So I'm glad it was hopefully early-ish on, but you still got plenty of time in you to go and make a difference on your own. So when you did pitch the 4-day work week as a strategic business solution with a 3-year plan to back it up, you got told it wasn't commercial enough, like you just said. But looking back at that now, what do you think that in that moment what it actually revealed about how most organizations think about the time and therefore the productivity?
And so I love that question because I think one of the key things that defines modern work is this assumption that we've all kind of internalized as we get into the workforce, that the more hours you do, the better worker you are. And therefore, if you want to do better, you work more hours. And, if a business needs to make more money, they need their people to work more hours. And I think what we need to do is sort of examine that implicit belief that we all hold about work and flip it. There is actually so much evidence that longer hours does not directly lead to more output or more outcome. Like literally in World War I, munitions factories in Britain they just had the 8-hour working day awarded, but they were in the middle of a war. So they were like, well, never mind that. Let's extend the hours because we have this urgent need for more munition. And so they extended the shifts. And what they found was that the output didn't increase correspondingly. And so they actually went back to the 8-hour shifts. A decade later, 1926, Henry Ford did his famous experiments with he had his factories working on a 6-day week and he put them onto a 5-day week and then went back to 6 days and then to 5. And he did really rigorous experiments and he concluded he got more output from his factories working a 5-day week than a 6. So I think, there's this, that was 100 years ago this year. And modern experiments with things like the 4-day work week or other forms of flexibility have shown that that relationship between hours and outcomes is not linear.
Huh.
And so I think, to put this into today's world, like if you ask any student on a deadline or any, busy working mum, to use the cliche, they are the most efficient people ever. And so, yeah, that's right. Exactly. And so this is very much about saying, well, what could it look like if every single person in an organization was working as efficiently and effectively as a busy working mum or a student on a deadline all the time? What could that unlock? And I think that really makes us think differently, not about necessarily what what people immediately go to as a restriction of time or a downside of working fewer hours, but it's actually, well, what could we unlock if we play around with that implicit belief that more hours must mean more output? Because it's actually false.
I like that you actually reference history because everyone can relate to Henry Ford. Everyone knows who that person is, right? And we're talking 100 years ago. Yet we've never really changed since. When I was still in corporate sales, there was this loose discussion about it. Did anybody at enterprise level adopt it? No, because it was too hard. And just what you said is they assumed more hours means more output, more team members means more output. I actually disagree. Judging from my experiences, it actually creates more work because there's less clarity. And there's actually been a study recently that actually displayed that shorter, high-focus blocks of 2 hours with a half an hour break is more productive than 8 hours with a half an hour break. So, universe, do with that with what you will. New founders, enterprise levels. But for me as a business, right, when I look at things, it's not about how many hours the staff put in. It's about what is the outcome. Like if you can nail it in 1 hour and you go and do something else for 7, that's fine. As long as you over deliver. And that's, I don't know, maybe it's just the way that we think about things, but
No, but I think what you said there is actually the linchpin of all of this, which is the outcomes. So if we're clear on what the outcomes are, then it gives us so much creativity in how we deliver those outcomes. But if what we're measuring is input or chargeability or some sort of input-based or time-based metric, then we have a lot less freedom and creativity in how we deliver that. And so you're always going to get what you've always got. But when we flip it, then it's possible to do so much more.
And then also, like, when we look at the world of AI, we look at how do we make the humans be more human or allow them to be more human, right? And there's this almost like beautiful overcorrection in the AI tech space is more focused on the human than there ever was before because there's things that humans can do that AI would never be able to do. And often that is synthesizing emotions, right? So it's really interesting to see how that actually plays out. And speaking to you being a sort of a key component to making that happen, it would be really interesting to see what kind of success you really achieve with what you've just mentioned. So it's really exciting stuff. Now, AI is being sold as the ultimate time creator. In the back of that conversation is you've called it a double-edged sword before, and what you're actually seeing play out in the business right now. Why do you think so few people are stopping to ask whether they're solving the right problems with it?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It should be a time creator, a time enabler. But the reality of how most people and most organizations are currently using it is that it's actually causing more stress and more burnout and this sense of I've got to run faster and faster just to keep up. And so that's what I meant by the double-edged sword. Like it should be this, but it's actually that. And what I think we should be doing that we're not consistently doing is two things. One, as you said, is be really clear on what are the problems that I want to try and solve with AI, because AI can do so many different things. We could use it in so many different ways, but there's a real step change in impact when you use it to do fewer things excellently. And so that's the first thing, is like figure out where are the biggest productivity pain points in my business right now, and then how can AI help me to solve those. And the second thing that we need to do is use it very intentionally to create time that we then protect. Yeah, that's right. So what I see all the time is because we can do things faster or because we can create more stuff, we do. And then we move on to the next thing and we keep running and running. And that's why we're all feeling very overwhelmed and very like work is just going to get faster and faster. But there is an opportunity for us to be really intentional about what the space and time in our weeks is that we want to use the AI to create and protect. But we have to get it in the right order. We can't say, oh, well, when I feel like I have enough time, then I will rest, because that's never going to happen. We have to make the decision first. We have to decide what do we want this new world of AI to look like for us? And for me, that's about constraining the amount of time that I allow work to take. And that's what I work with organizations on. So decide, are you going to take 5 to 8 hours of business as usual out of your week? And then what do you want to use that time for? It might be time off, which is the kind of classic 4-day week or shorter work week. But most of the organizations I work with actually use it to invest in their future success. So it's time for strategic thinking, or it's time for team building and connection, reconnecting to purpose. Maybe it's time for experimentation with AI or learning and development. So when you create that time, the life-changing bit, and I know I said this to you, the life-changing bit is that you get control of the chaos and the busy. It's not necessarily about what you do with that time that you free up. It's that you're really intentional and deliberate about how you create time and then protect it.
Yeah, it's funny when you say like that. My brain immediately goes to like wealth protection, because it's the same thing. It's the exact same principle, just in different categories. And I just wanted to sort of add to your point is, if you do not make the time, your body will make the time for you. And often guilty either. I don't actively think about, like, if I had another 2 hours in the day, what else would do, right? And I think maybe this conversation is coming serendipitously, but I know there's people in 5 of my immediate circle that have the exact same problem. So it's not only from a bigger business and organization standpoint, it's from a personal standpoint as well. That filters out to your lifestyle as well, making an impact there.
Yeah, exactly. It affects all of your life. And it circles back to that hidden belief that we were talking about, which is we are all so trained that I just need to work harder, work longer. And that actually leads directly to burnout culture. So reframing that, reprogramming our minds to start with what is the most productive use of my time? It's investing in future success. It's time to think. Like Warren Buffett spends before he retired, spent 80% of his working hours reading and thinking. Like that is productivity. And we don't, we don't actually stop and value that time to change gears, allow ourselves to think deeply. And really, that is But actually, that is where we create the future value. And that is where we feel a lot more grounded and centered, which, as you say, then connects out into the rest of our lives and relationships.
I think the important note there is time is the most expensive commodity. I'm learning that very quickly. Now, you've worked across a few different productivity pillars, mainly being systems, processes, and automations, which is where AI comes in. And when you go into a business for the first time, where do you usually find the biggest time leaks hiding?
So let me tell you what the 4 productivity pillars are for context for your listeners, and then I'll sort of focus on that systems, processes, and automation. So that's one. And I would say that pillar is actually about working smart. So it's not about what is the right system today. It's about how do you create a culture of continuous improvement around your systems and your processes and automations. And that's absolutely what like AI natively does, is help you create that culture of continuous improvement. The second pillar is carving out time for deep work and focus time and figuring out what is getting in my way of really creating value rather than just busy work. So much of modern work is actually just what Cal Newport, who wrote the book A World Without Email, he calls it this hyperactive hive mind of busyness. Emails create emails, meetings create meetings, and suddenly we have no time to do our actual work. So that's the second pillar. The third one is interpersonal effectiveness. And this is things like effective feedback, delegation, accountability. And we never talk about interpersonal effectiveness as a productivity lever, but we absolutely should, because if you think about the productivity gap between really high performing teams and teams that can't tie their own shoelaces without bickering about it, the productivity gap is huge. So that's the third pillar. Fourth is well-being, social, mental, physical well-being, because if you're going to bring your A game and work at a higher intensity for that constrained number of hours, you need to have your well-being in place to support it. So those are the 4 pillars. I would say every single organization has something from each of the 4 pillars, but the biggest time sucks tend to be the hyperactive hive mind, the constant busy work. So that comes out everywhere. Meetings are almost always a pain point, but there are other associated with modern work that celebrate busy rather than impact that we can sort of unpack and address once we see them clearly. In the systems, processes, and automation, that actually, I have to say, looks very different. That's probably the area that the biggest time unlock looks the most different from organization to organization. So in some, it's about workflow and creating accountability through the work process, so everyone knows what they're supposed to do when, and removing the blockages where everyone's waiting to be updated on something or waiting to know that their turn is come. So that's probably a really common one. There also are quite a lot of pain points around like admin systems, and everyone's probably listening to that and groaning, going, "Oh, yeah." And I suppose the starting point there is to really have a look at the process, not necessarily the platform, and to try to unpack, like, why does this process happen when it happens? Why are these the people doing that process? Is it fit for current purpose, or have we inherited that from the way it used to be? Have we designed a purpose, or is this just cobbled together, just how we started to develop things and we've never actually systematized it? So there's a really, once you identify a pain point, then you can go deep and figure out, well, what is that actual thing that we need to solve here? And it might not be the platform, it might be just how you're using that process. Does that process even need to happen, or is there a better way of doing it? And that's where AI can make a huge impact.
Just sort of adding to your point is, as businesses and organizations become more and more mature, they focus on internal systems less and less and less, which means these exact same things that you just mentioned is when it pops its ugly head, because especially in the Australian market, and I'm saying this out of experience, is you're so focused on the front end, you forget about the optimizations on the back end, right? And you get to a point where you're like, oh, it's too hard to change it. So I'm just if it's not broken, don't fix it. That's the worst case scenario that I can think from a business perspective, because if you don't actively analyze and diagnose, you're never really going to be able to improve the back end, because a lot of people, when they look at optimization, they think of, okay, what other tools can I add? And just like you mentioned before, it's not really going to increase productivity if you don't know what the actual issue is to begin with.
That's right. Exactly.
That's a really interesting point. And I think it's a nice reminder to have this conversation with Anne, and whoever is listening to this is actually take a step back and actually analyze it, give it an overview, and really start to look at the internal systems of the business before you look at external systems. That's definitely going against what my business does compared to Anne's, but it is important. It is very important.
We need both.
You do, right?
So we've got to do it in the right order.
Now, you've got two very clear verticals, startup scaling in climate tech and clean energy being one, and professional services firms trading time for money being the second. What is about those two spaces specifically that makes the productivity conversation land so differently compared to everybody else in the field?
Yeah. I love that question because productivity is such a broad conversation. So with the climate tech, clean energy industry, what's different there is that there are so many firms that are in the process of moving from startup to scale up. And what happens is, if you're going to 10x your business, unless you have done the work to figure out what are the right work behaviors, have you designed for time, have you done the diagnosis that we were just talking about? Unless you've done that, you're also going to 10x your problems as you scale. And so for the clean energy sort of scale up space, it's very much around how do you scale ambitiously without burning out your people? So it's very much a burnout conversation there. And also, how do you create capacity for growth? The second vertical that you talked about is professional services firms. And these are firms that are going through a massive disruption. So they are used to a time for money business model. And so, when I say to them, like we were talking about just now, hours does not deliver, it's not linear with outcomes, that totally challenges their entire business model. I was talking to a global CHRO who said, we sell time for money. And I was like, no, you don't. You solve clients' problems. That is the outcome that they are paying you for. And if you think about a lawyer, for example, what they are delivering is not billable minutes. That's how they price their work. What they're delivering is a solution to the client's problem. And I want to work with a lawyer that is incentivized to find a solution in the most efficient possible way. But the current or traditional business model for lawyers has been almost like perversely incentivizes lawyers to create complexity because they can charge more. And AI is changing the dynamic in these industries because buyers, clients, know that AI can do things in a fraction of the time that the human can do. And so if they are trained to pay for minutes or hours rather than outcomes, it's totally going to disrupt the business model of these professional services firms. And so there is a really active disruption that's happening across consulting, across insights, my old industry, across accounting, across law, advertising, media. All of these types of firms are having to really grapple with how do we price for value-based outcomes, and how do we, in some cases it's rethink our business model so that we have a conversation around this is the value you're creating and we're creating for you and this is what it's worth for you, as opposed to this is how many hours we are going to spend on this.
And I think just sort of tapping the end of that conversation into one of our previous conversations is how AI is almost allowing us to overcorrect all of those issues that, especially when it comes to the law/finance industry, systems or processes, business models have not been touched in centuries. And it's about time that they change it. One, not only for productivity for within the team, but also being able to output the results that clients are ultimately paying for. Yeah, I think successful businesses will actively go and look at, like, how do we actually deliver value first? Let's talk about investment later. Well, at least that's how I sort of see businesses moving forward. Now, you said to me, your mission is to change the lives of 1 million people. Not a small feat. And
Dream big, dream big.
But if you go to a organization that has 5,000 people, that's a good fair chunk, right? That ultimately means that the one-to-one model will only get you so far, and you'll be around for a very long time. How are you thinking about scaling that methodology without losing what makes it?
It's a good question. So I think in order to change the lives of 1 million people, it sounds really flippant, but it's genuinely life-changing for people when they get control of the chaos and the busy and the stress of work and are able to create this time for themselves, for their future, for their people. So as you say, the hands-on consulting model isn't going to allow me to impact 100 million people. 100, fine. 1 million people, not in my lifetime anyway. And so what I have done is, you remember that step-by-step process that I talked about right at the beginning, that was my new, the new playbook that I decided to build rather than trying to fix it from within the system. That is completely recorded in little bite-sized video modules supported by worksheets and exercises. So anybody can take this and apply it to their own business. They can do it as what I call a shown to you model. So I would have a kickoff session with them, make sure that they're set up in the right direction. They've got their outcomes defined properly and they're ready to go. And then off they go and they have everything they need to do that. Or some would then want to do a done with you model where I would take them up to the productivity audit and help them identify those opportunities that they can then find their own solutions and implement the changes for. So I'm not so much doing a done for you model where I go in and make all the changes for organizations, because as you say, that's a really slow way of impacting people one at a time or a handful at a time. What I really want to do is put this program into the hands of progressive leaders who want to change how they're going to run their organization and want to create time and give that back to the organization, back to their people.
So does that count if by product, right? So let's say if we use the education piece that you just mentioned, but you put it to a C-suite, right? Someone who has impact and drive and can actually make a difference within an organization. If they then take those learnings and then go and improve it for their team of 50 to 100, does that still count to your million?
Yes, that's exactly how I want them to operate, right? So I would see a progressive leader take this, set up a team of productivity champions around them, and together work through this paint by numbers process to identify and create and protect time. And that will be game changing for their whole team.
Because essentially you're subdividing little champions to go out and do it for you, which is a much smarter way than doing it one by one. Because like you said, it will take a little while.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, one last question for you, Anne, before we wrap up your episode. You said something that really stuck with me in our first conversation, and that is if you're going to 10x your business, you'll 10x your problems. You mentioned it again here today, unless you stop and design the work for time. Now, for any founder listening who's running fast and hasn't stopped to ask that question, what's the one thing you'd want them to do differently starting tomorrow?
I have so many things I would like to say, but to keep it simple, I'm going to give you the starting point. The starting point is decide what your constraint of time is. How much time are you willing to give? And it should be, I guess, a constrained enough amount of time that it forces you to look at how you work and what you work on and find ways to do it better. So don't wait until that one day when I will have enough time and then I will do this. It's never going to arrive. So the most important starting point is to decide today, how much time would you ideally create to invest in your future you and future business? And then you can set about figuring out how to deliver your outcomes within that constraint. But it is never going to go the other way around. So make the decision first.
Well, I certainly am going to do that today. It wasn't the point of the podcast, but now I feel like I'm like, okay, well, all of those things that we outlined, especially when it comes to symptoms, is all of what I do. So I'm personally going to go and adopt this right away.
Excellent. Good.
So, I mean, Anne, this one really hit different. This episode has hit differently. It's not only from a commercial standpoint, but it's all from a lifestyle standpoint. Your origin stories, the AI double-edged sword framing, the million people mission. There's a lot here that goes well beyond productivity and into how we actually want to build our businesses and our lives subsequently. Links to connect with Anne and access the productivity diagnostics are all in the show notes below. But if you're ready to build a sales engine that actually converts, you know where to find me as well. In the meantime, keep building meaningfully. But Anne, thank you so much for featuring on the podcast. It's been a really enlightening episode, to say the least.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Jenny. Thank you for having me.